Hello and welcome to a live deprogram with Keri Smith from the road. Is this thing on? I have to ask if this is working. Is the audio working? Is the video working? I finally have a place with Wi-Fi. It's good to see some of you guys. Hello, Therese. See you guys in the chat. Yeah, it's early, bros and bros. It's early. This is not our usual time. This is 9 a.m. Central, 8 a.m. Mountain People time. And but this was the only time that was going to work. Otherwise, we're going to have to miss another show. So, and there's so much happening that I wanted to talk about. Hey, Therese. Oh, thank you. So, hey, Stephen. I want you guys to know something. First of all, welcome. If it's your first time here, usually I do live shows on Mondays and Fridays at 1 o'clock Central. And we talk about what's in the news or what's on my mind, or we talk about actually the whole point of the show, which is we talk about woke ideology, social justice ideology, how better to define it, how to figure out what it is, how to explain what it is to other people, and how it is not liberalism. And so we look at the world through this lens of better understanding social justice and woke or identity Marxism, whatever you want to call it, because that is currently the dominant religion, the dominant belief system in America, and it's not liberalism. And so that's usually what we do. If there are new people here, I've met some people on the road this week, and welcome if you are here. We are in Colorado. My husband, I'm blessed to get to be on tour with my husband and his band, and they've been doing some shows up here in Creed, Colorado, and South Fork. They just played the Headwaters Music Festival. It was so much fun. And then last night had an amazing show in South Fork, and I love it. It's beautiful up here. It's cold weather. We get to wear our coats. It's so hot in Texas, so this has been nice. And we're getting ready to head out today. So I had to do this show early because we're leaving. And we are going to be, I think we have a couple more shows in Colorado. They have a couple more shows in Colorado, and we're heading up to Wyoming and Montana and then down to New Mexico. So if you're in any of those states, I've already met some people from Deprogrammed out here on the road. If you are in any of those states, you can check out my husband's full schedule at anthonygarciamusic.com, and you can come to any of those shows and say hello. I would love to meet you. Okay, that's the announcements. Also, if you're new, it's going to be a little different because I am on the road, and it's a little different when you're from a cabin and you're trying to collect your thoughts. But for the regulars, let me show you guys something. I finally did it. Look at this. I'm finally MAGA. I finally got the hat. There were these lovely ladies here in Colorado on the side of the road with a Trump table, and they were selling Trump merchandise, and they were with, I believe it's Women for Trump Colorado. 3 awesome ladies, one of whom also woke up and left the left like I did. And we were just swapping stories and talking to people, and I was like, you know what? I have never been MAGA. I've never had the hat. I've never been, and those of you who are MAGA know what I mean. Here's the thing. The left calls everyone MAGA. They've called me MAGA for years. They don't differentiate. Nuance doesn't matter. If you are at all supportive of Trump, if you voted for Trump in 2020 or 2016 or what have you, I voted for him. If you're new here, so you know, I'm one of the people who cried when he won in 2016. I was one of those people flipping out, thought that a demagogue had just won. And 4 years later, I voted for the man as a liberal. And the left, the cult I used to be in, they call everyone MAGA. They don't differentiate at all. But you guys know what I mean. The real MAGA, you're like, Keri's not MAGA. She's not on the train. She voted for him, but she doesn't have the hat. She's not, she's not in the parade, like that kind of thing. And that's true. I've been also, I'm very critical of him at times. He was not my choice in the primaries. I was for DeSantis. But here's when I decided, you know what? I'm getting the flippin' hat. It was first of all, it was, the first time I had that thought was when they convicted him on all these crazy trumped up felonies. If you don't know what I'm talking about why I say trumped up, go back and watch. I got to do an interview with an attorney, with Sean from Potentially Criminal, and we went through each of the charges, and we went through these ridiculous accusations and what they did to basically try and, use lawfare against their political enemies, and the fact that they did this travesty of justice, this kangaroo court, they convicted him on this and they were celebrating it, 32 felonies or whatever. At that moment, I was like, I think I'm gonna get the hat. F these people. Screw these people. Right? Just to abuse our system in that way, to abuse our system and to try and subvert the political process by prosecuting your political enemies, that infuriates me. I don't care who you are. I don't care who you are. Of course, it makes me like him more that you would do that to him. And then they tried to kill him, okay? They tried to kill him. And it's almost like they've successfully memory hold that. Isn't that crazy? They tried to assassinate our former president. They clipped his ear. And, you know, nobody even knows the date that happened. They've memory hold it. But oh my gosh, January 6th. Oh my goodness. January 6th forever seared in our minds with the propaganda, right? Oh, the insurrection. Oh, January 6th. It's like a sacred holy day for these freaks. But they've completely forgotten this assassination attempt that happened this past month. They tried to kill him, and I agree with Joe Rogan. That moment when he in the video where he stood back up and he tried to inspire the crowd and pumped his fist in the air and said, "Fight, fight," to the crowd after being almost killed, that was the most I think it was Rogan who said that was the most American thing I've ever seen. That was the most American thing I've ever seen. And at that point, I was like, "Okay, I'm getting the hat." Like, screw you guys. They're gonna call you if you're like me, if you voted for Trump, but and I know there's a lot of you in the audience who you're still consider yourself liberal, or you're still consider yourself on the left, or you're a centrist, or you're libertarian, or and you still have a lot of this programmed. I think a lot of it is programmed disgust factor about him, or embarrassment about voting for him. I know some of you told me privately that you voted for him in 2020, but you haven't told anyone else, or you've only told one or two people, and that's okay. That's okay. But what I'm saying is you can shed that's programmed disgust stuff. You can shed that slowly, and I've shed a lot of it, and I don't give a fucking F anymore. What they call me, what they say, they're gonna say it anyway, so I'm leaning into it. I'm wearing the red hat. I'm embracing it. Yes. Yes. Um, anyway, got the hat. Not wearing it today, though. This lighting's not great for it. I'm still a lady. This lady's gotta figure out the best lighting to wear it. Okay. So I just wanted to say that, and, if those ladies in Colorado who saw me with this hat are watching, hello, and it was very nice to meet you. RFK Jr., this is what I wanted to talk about today. There's so much that's happened since Friday, and I didn't get to do a show on Friday. There was a lot of anticipation for his announcement that he was going to be giving a speech, and people were noticing that, Trump also had announced a special guest at his rally, and so a lot of people were saying, "Look, RFK is gonna suspend his campaign and throw his support behind Trump." And boy, did he. He gave an amazing speech, and it's the kind of speech that I was reading it, and it's a real shame because people today, we don't read. I'm not talking about you individually. As my friend Josh Slocum says, supply your not alls. Not all. That doesn't apply to all of us. Okay, I get it. I'm saying in general, we as a people do not read. We as a people are not concerned with things that are important. this we just read in Deprogrammed Book Club, which you should join. You should be a part of. We just read Benjamin Franklin's autobiography, and I was reading it and just thinking about how uh, verbose people were, how skilled people, how articulate they were, how skilled they were at writing and expressing themselves and getting their point of view across, and also the fact that people were very interested in reading and understanding each other better and understanding ideas and thinking about big picture stuff. And we don't do that as a people anymore. Our culture, how many people do you think listened to his speech or read it? Very few. And that's a shame, because if this is the kind of speech, if delivered 100 years ago, would have made history. This would have been a speech that you might read excerpts from in your history books. And now it's just a little blip in the news cycle, right? So this was an excellent speech. We're going to watch it. I don't know if we'll watch the whole thing. We're going to watch it, or at least I'm going to read part of it to you. We'll see how it goes. I've got both pulled up. I have the transcript and I have the video. And so RFK basically, this is the way I'm viewing it. Maybe you're viewing it this way too. He suspended his campaign. Now he's still on the ballot and you can still vote for him. But he recognized that we are at a place that is it's so perilous for our country and for democracy itself. And this is his attempt to help save the republic. This is his attempt to help save democracy. And it's funny, he mentions in his speech how, much like me, he left the Democratic Party because they've become the antithesis of everything they used to stand for. And they get out there and they say stuff about saving democracy. Oh, we got to defeat Trump so we can save democracy. These are liars and psychopaths saying this. And the people repeating it are mindless drones. They're sheep. They're in a cult. They're called it's easier to understand it if you understand that the left functions like a cult. I'm saying this as someone who was in it. So they just mindlessly repeat this stuff. Save democracy. Meanwhile, they don't seem to notice that their party was filing lawsuits to make sure that RFK could not be on the ticket. They were trying to keep him off the ticket. They were trying to fight democracy. Imagine that. They didn't want him at the Democratic primaries. They didn't want him to be a part of the debates. They tried to make sure he wouldn't be a part of debates. Imagine that. It's almost like they're anti-democracy. They tried to keep him off the ballot like they're anti-democracy. It's crazy, right? It's also crazy that they appointed their nominee. They didn't even let the people vote. They didn't even have an election. They appointed Kamala. They selected her. Unvetted, doesn't do interviews, terrible speaker. Wonder why? Wonder why they just put her on there without a vote? And these are the people running around talking about democracy, democracy. These fascists is what they are. My old party. And RFK left this party for the same reason, for similar reasons. And we're going to hear him talk about that in the speech. And we're also going to see, after he gave this speech, after he did this very brave thing, after he sacrificed his campaign to try and throw in with Trump and say, look, unity party, let's get this done. We have to save democracy. We have to save the republic. These fascists are going to, this is me speaking, not him, in my opinion, they're going to fix it. They're going to do whatever they need to do, like they always do. But he's at least trying. He's at least trying to do something. Very brave thing to do, right? And what does the cult do? Look how they responded. We're just like if you leave Scientology and they all come after you and they all publicly disown you and they call you a suppressive person. The woke cult, the left cult, what it's become. Some of you who left, like me, you will recognize what they're doing to RFK right now. It's just that he's much higher profile. He's a very public person, obviously. So it's happening at a very high, intense level. But it's the same thing that we all went through. They're all posting announcements. They're all calling him out, condemning him. They're condemning their family members, some of them. They got family members to come out and condemn him. They're all, they're pressuring his wife to denounce him. Can you imagine for his wife to denounce him? This is what cults do. This is what cults do. They are trying to unperson him. They're saying the filthiest things. Mia Farrow, all these celebrities out here trying to pile on and treat him like an apostate. He's a suppressive person, right? He threw in for Trump. Oh, he's not for the cult. The cult's they've gotta squash him. They've got to unperson him. That's what's happening right now. He is going through a very public and a very large version of what a lot of us went through when we left the cult, and we recognize it. And you know what? To him, I just hope, I'm praying for him. I pray that he remains strong because I respect what he did. I respect him leaving his campaign to throw in and try to save the democracy, throw in with Trump. I respect that. And I'm praying for him, and I hope he's strong, and I hope he pays it no mind, because these people saying these things, these demons, these monsters, they're not fit to shine his shoes. These nasty people. Nasty people. Yes, Helena, Mia made a tweet about how his father would be ashamed. Yes, putting words in the mouth of dead people, putting words in the mouth of his dead father. What kind of ghoul does that? Go F yourself. I saw he said to one of his like nephews or someone who was saying the same thing on Twitter, he was like, F you. And people were saying, oh, it's going to be an interesting Thanksgiving. Well, if I were him, I wouldn't be having Thanksgiving with those ghouls in the family. Yeah, those ones in the cult. Adam says, disfellowshipping like Jehovah's Witnesses. Yeah, he is going through it right now. Torgo the White, thanks for supporting Deprogrammed, who's been a member for 4 months. Thank you so much, sir. And he says, nice lid, big OT. You talking about my hat? Yeah. I'm in Colorado, so I get to wear all the hats. Good morning, Jennifer Atkins. Okay, we're going to get this video queued up. I'm going to have a sip of coffee. Now, again, we're watching this because it's important. And because our culture, we're just like 24/7. There's so much information, and we don't watch and read the speeches that we should read and that we should watch. And so maybe you haven't seen it yet, and that's okay. We're going to watch it together. We might speed up parts of it. I don't know about you guys, but his manner of speaking, it's sometimes hard for me to listen to him in long doses. Okay. Can you guys see that? There we go.
Hello, everyone. Welcome so much for being here. I'd like to introduce everyone to bring on Robert F. Kennedy Jr.
I'm sorry to keep everybody waiting. 16 months ago, in April of 2023, I launched my campaign for President of the United States. I began this journey as a Democrat, the party of my father, my uncle, the party which I pledged my own allegiance to long before I was old enough to vote. I attended my first Democratic convention at the age of 6 in 1960. And back then, the Democrats were the champions of the Constitution, of civil rights. The Democrats stood against authoritarianism, against censorship, against colonialism, imperialism, and unjust wars. We were the party of labor, of the working class. The Democrats were the party of government transparency and the champion of the environment. Our party was the bulwark against big money interests and corporate power. True to its name, it was the party of democracy. As you know, I left that party in October because it had departed so dramatically from the core values that I grew up with. It had become the party of war, censorship, corruption, big pharma, big tech, big ag, and big money. When it abandoned democracy by canceling the primary to conceal the cognitive decline of the sitting president, I left the party to run as an independent. The mainstream of American politics and journalism derided my decision. Conventional wisdom said that it would be impossible even to get on the ballot as an independent because each state poses an insurmountable tangle of arbitrary rules for collecting signatures. I would need over 1 million signatures, something no presidential candidate in history had ever achieved. And then I'd need a team of attorneys and millions of dollars to handle all the legal challenges from the DNC. The naysayers told us that we were climbing a glass version of Mount Impossible. So the first thing I want to tell you is that we proved them wrong.
You guys, I've been muted this whole time. I'm so sorry. You guys, that's hilarious. Oh my God, unmute the mic. I can't hear you. Fluid in science. Oh my God, I'm so sorry. I wanted to stop. Okay, let me just if you're still hanging in here, thank you. Oh my God. Look at this. Problems from the road. Here's what I was saying. This part of the speech, I wanted to pause because this was the part that really resonates with me. This is the part that probably resonates with you if you also left the Democratic Party. Let me take this down for a second. I was a Democrat the entirety of my adult life. I left the party in 2016. I'll summarize what I was saying. I voted for Bernie in the primaries in 2016, and then I switched to green. I couldn't vote for Hillary. I also couldn't vote for Trump. My programming was very much in effect. And I thought Trump was a demagogue and I believed all the things about him. And, oh my gosh, we got to stop him. Every Republican was like Hitler, right? That's what they teach you in the left. And I really believed that. And, we have to stop him. And so my programming really was telling me to vote for Clinton. But there was something in my gut. I did not like her. I couldn't figure out why, but they like almost like a monkey is afraid of a snake, even if they've never seen a snake. There was something in me in my gut that I couldn't vote for Clinton. And I kept going back and forth because the programming was still there. And I was like, I have to vote for her, but I also don't want to, but I have to vote for her. So to make sure Trump doesn't win, but I don't want to. And in the end, I moved to Texas. I voted absentee. I voted for Jill Stein, but I didn't send my ballot in on time, so I don't think they counted. It didn't count. And then I was joking with you guys when I saw you saying unmute. I was joking with you that it's California, so they probably did count my ballot late. Anyway, so that's when I became Green Party, 2016, very briefly. Then I became undeclared in Texas, and I've I've never been a member of a party since. So I was Democrat my whole life, briefly Green, and now nothing. I voted for my first Republican in 2018, and that was Ted Cruz in Texas. And I voted for him because he was my most liberal option, because he was running against Beto. And Beto, much like Biden, much like Kamala, much like the Democrats that RFK is deriding, he is pro big business. He's pro war. He's pro censorship. He is pro violence. He wants to disarm the American people. He is thoroughly woke. He's not liberal. He's thoroughly woke. He's an authoritarian, pro big pharma, pro corporation, all this stuff. So I could not vote for that. And sometimes conservatives laugh when I say I voted for Ted Cruz in 2018, my first Republican, because he was the most liberal option. They think that's funny, but it's also true. It's also true. We liberals, true liberals, have a lot more in common with conservatives than we do with the woke. In fact, liberals and conservatives are not all that different. The woke, these extremists, this cult that's taken over the Democratic Party that I used to be a part of, this cult that's taken over the mainstream that I used to be a part of, we don't have anything in common with them. If you're a liberal and you start to realize that, it's easier to leave. It's easier to leave that cult. So this part of the speech is the part that really resonated with me. And I'm just going to, because some of you like me, you might have trouble with his manner of speaking. I just want to underline this part. So let me just read this. He talks about how he's always been a Democrat, the party of his father and uncle. He pledged his allegiance to it long before he was old enough to vote. He talks about going to the DNC, the Democratic National Convention, at the age of 6. He talks about what the Democrats used to stand for. He says back then, the Democrats were the champions of the Constitution and of civil rights. The Democrats stood against authoritarianism, against censorship, against colonialism, against imperialism, and against unjust wars. He says, we were the party of labor, of the working class. The Democrats were the party of government transparency and the champion of the environment. Our party was the bulwark against big money interests and corporate power. True to its name, it was the party of democracy. And then he says, as you know, I left that party in October because it had departed so dramatically from the core values that I grew up with. It had become the party of war, censorship, corruption, big pharma, big tech, big ag, and big money. When it abandoned democracy by canceling the primary to conceal the cognitive decline of the sitting president, I left the party to run as an independent. Just think about that for a second. They did that. They did do that. They hid from you. If you're on the left, I'm talking to you. They hid from you. They lied straight to your face. They lied bald face liars right to your face about the cognitive decline of the president. And you probably believed them because you're only watching cult media and you're only listening to sound bites and what they tell you to believe. Those of us who got outside the cult and watch other things and interact with all kinds of media, even media we disagree with, but we watch all kinds of, and we get our news elsewhere. We've known about this for years. Just think about that, how they conned you for years until they were ready to kick him to the curb and throw him under the bus. And if you're on the left, I'll ask you one thing. Usually the presidential debates are in October. So that means they wouldn't have even happened yet. It's August right now. This debate between Biden and Trump happened in June. Isn't that weird? June? A whole 4 months early? Why'd it happen in June? Why'd they want to do it so early? And don't you think it's weird for those of us who've been awake, who knew for years about his cognitive decline and that he could barely function and that they were carrying water for him and softballing questions for him and not putting him in front of the cameras at certain times of day and, really just giving you guys sound bites. We knew all this. When we saw those debates, we were like, OMG, what are they doing? They're sacrificing him to the wolves. They knew this was going to happen. They pushed him out here like this on purpose. Oh my goodness. They want him gone. They want a coup. They want him to fall on his face. His own party is doing this to him. They want him to fall on his face, and they want him to do it early enough so that they can get a different name on the ballot. Because I forget at what point you have to have the name on there, but they couldn't have waited till October. They pushed him out there in front of the cameras in June for the debate. They threw Biden under the bus, and you guys watched it happen. Like a bunch of commies, they knifed him in the back on national television. They let that happen. And they got what they wanted, didn't they? You guys didn't even get to have a primary election. You didn't even get to choose your candidate. They did a coup on you. Meanwhile, they got you running around talking about democracy, democracy. They selected your nominee for you. Child. Right? Child. Poor sweet child. What party are you in? It's not what you think it's about. That's why I left that party. You are in a crazy. Here's some words that are very accurate to describe the Democratic Party now. You could call them fascists. They are, in fact, fascists. They do believe in government consolidation, control with corporations. Look at what they did during COVID. They thought the government had a right to come in and shut down small mom and pop businesses and tell you guys that you couldn't operate your businesses and even throw some of you in jail. I interviewed a grandma that they threw in jail. They thought the government had a right to do this. That's fascist. They left all the big corporations open, of course. Government's working hand in hand with them. That's fascist. They worked with the big corporations. They worked with Big Social during the last election to censor the news. All of this came out during the Twitter files. Biden's administration, they were in there censoring the Hunter laptop story. All of this came out in Twitter. This is fascist. You guys are in a fascist party. Another word that could be used accurately to describe the Democratic Party nowadays, communist. It's funny, it has elements of both. Both are authoritarian. Both are about government control over individual liberty. And woke has elements of both. It has elements of fascism and has elements of communism. Communist elements, for example, Kamala Harris talking about how she wants to tell private companies she's going to do price controls. Go in and set price controls. That's crazy. You guys are just going along like, this will be fine. What party are you in? What are you in? This is the party of, like RFK said, censorship, big government, big corporations, big pharma. This is not what it used to be. It's not what it used to be. Okay. I just want to thank a couple people for hanging out. Mario Trulio for $2. Thank you. Says, do not be silent, Keri. Speak proud, woman. This is when I was muted. So sorry. I should have been looking at chat. I was on a roll, though. Tracy from Keto and Crime. Tracy, thanks for being here for $2. You are muted. You guys. Thank you. John Thomas for $10. Thanks for supporting the channel. Says, this is about globalism and totalitarianism versus freedom and Republican and representative governance. I also saw this. We need to make it a thing. Yeah. Philanthropath. Ooh, what a great new word. Are you coining this? Are you coining this word? Philanthropath, psychopath masquerading as a philanthropist. I love it. There's a lot of those, aren't they? There's a lot of philanthropaths. I like that word. They like to discuss themselves. Predators always do. It's the same way you find predators, the variety of predator who preys on children. You find them working with children. You find them sometimes as priests. You find them as kindergarten teachers. You find them in schools. Like, they find jobs near their prey. And it's the same thing with the predators of the type who want to control the world. they disguise themselves as philanthropists, the ones who want to take away individual rights, the ones who oppose the people, enemies of the people. They describe themselves as caring about the people. It's the opposite, right? We care about the people, and we want to fund all this stuff for the people. That's how they hide themselves. G-Man for $5. Thank you, G-Man says, I'm looking forward to Biden coming back in 4 years for another bite of the apple. Let's go, Brandon. Oh man, no, they're putting him in a box and shipping him far away. They really did a number on him, huh? Like, just we watched a coup in front of us, and I mean, I guess it seems like a lot of the people in the party, the little people, the sheep, they don't even care. Half of them don't. They don't even realize what just happened. They don't even recognize it as a coup. That's crazy. That's how far in they are. Okay, let's go back to this speech. We're going to play a little bit more of this. We've got RFK's fantastic speech pulled up. Hey, Pirate Tomsky, give it up for one of our mods, Mr. Pirate Tomsky over in the UK, holding it down. Member for 19 months, says people who care about looking good while doing evil. Oh, yeah. That's like, you know who comes to mind immediately? Gavin Newsom. He's got that sociopath vibe, right? Like he's got it on lockdown. He looks like he stands in front of the mirror and practices his faces. He looks like that kind of sociopath. You know, how do I look like I care about people? I'm joking, but I'm also serious. I really do think he's that kind. There are people who do stuff like that. There are. Okay. What did Elon Musk say? Pirate. I'm not sure. Did he say something about Gavin Newsom? Because I agree with him if he did. Okay, let's watch a little bit more. Now he's going to talk about his campaign and all the amazing things they did, given all the hills they had to climb. And think about one of the things he said here. He said, you know, not only did we have to get 1 million signatures and we had to cross all these hurdles to get on the ballot as an independent in each of these states because the Democrats had done everything they could to keep him out of debates and to keep him, you know, off the ticket as a Democrat and all these different things. He also says we knew we were going to have to raise millions of dollars and have a team of lawyers just to fight the lawsuits from the DNC, not from the RNC, not from the Republicans, but from the Democrats, right? Anti-democracy MFers. That's what they are. They were going to be filing lawsuit after lawsuit to try and keep him from being on the ballot. And he knew he was going to have money just to fight the lawsuits. Let's watch this part.
We did it because beneath the radar of mainstream media organs, we inspired a massive independent political movement. More than 100,000 volunteers sprang into action, hopeful that they could reverse our nation's decline. Many worked 10-hour days, sometimes in blizzards and blazing heat. They sacrificed family time, personal commitments, and sleep month after month, energized by a shared vision of a nation healed of its divisions. They set up tables at churches and farmers markets. They canvassed door to door. In Utah and in New Hampshire, volunteers collected signatures in snowstorms, convincing each supporter to stop in the frigid cold, to take off their gloves, and to sign legibly. During a heat wave in Nevada, I met a tall, athletic volunteer who cheerfully told me that he had lost 25 pounds collecting signatures in 117-degree heat. To finance this effort, young Americans donated their lunch money, and senior citizens gave up part of their Social Security checks. Our 50-state organization collected those millions of signatures and more. No presidential campaign in American political history has ever done that. And so I want to thank all of those dedicated volunteers and congratulate the campaign staff who coordinated this enormous logistical feat. Your accomplishments were regarded as impossible. You carried me up that glass mountain. You pulled off a miracle. You achieved what all the pundits said could never be done. You have my deepest gratitude, and I'm never going to forget that, not just for what you did for my campaign, but for the sacrifices you made because you love our country. You showed everyone that democracy is still possible here. It continues to survive in the press and in the idealistic human energies that still thrive beneath the canvas of neglect and of official and institutional corruption. Today, I'm here to tell you that I will not allow your efforts to go to waste. I'm here to tell you that I will leverage your tremendous accomplishments to serve the ideals that we share, the ideals of peace, of prosperity, of freedom, of health, all the ideals that motivated my campaign. I'm here today to describe the path forward that you have opened with your commitment and with your hard labors. Now, in an honest system, I believe that I would have won the election. In a system the like kind that my father and my uncles thrived in, a system with open debates, with fair primaries, with regularly scheduled debates, with fair primaries, and with a truly independent media untainted by government propaganda and censorship. In a system of nonpartisan courts and election boards, everything would be different. After all, the polls consistently showed me beating each of the other candidates, both in favorability and also in head-to-head matchups. But I'm sorry to say that while democracy may still be alive at the grassroots, it has become little more than a slogan for our political institutions, for our media, and for our government, and most sadly at all for me, the Democratic Party. In the name of saving democracy, the Democratic Party set itself to dismantling it, lacking confidence in its candidate, that its candidate could win in a fair election at the voting booth. The DNC waged continual legal warfare against both President Trump and myself. Each time that our volunteers turned in those towering boxes of signatures needed to get on the ballot, the DNC dragged us into court, state after state, attempting to erase their work and to subvert the will of the voters who had signed those petitions. It deployed DNC-aligned judges to throw me and other candidates off the ballot and to throw President Trump in jail.
I'm not going to forget to unmute this time. Let's pause it here because, and let me share the transcript part of this. This is to the leftists. Again, I just want to underline this part. What are you thinking? If you haven't left the Democratic Party yet, like so many of us have, what are you thinking? What are these people attacking him thinking? Listen to what he just said. This is so true. This is a matter of fact. This is not opinion. This is not emotion. This is factual. This is what the Democratic Party's been doing. They've been waging an anti-democratic war to keep him off the ballot. Why? If you're on the left, if you think you're a liberal and you claim to care about democracy and the will of the people and the right to vote and to have lots of options, why would you support a party that does this? What is wrong with you? Come to reality. Come to consciousness. Get out of your unconscious state where you just go along with the cult and the tribe and you say, oh, democracy, you care about democracy, where you just pay lip service to stuff that's surface level that you never think about. I see you people. I was in your cult. Think about the words, the things that you claim to care about, like democracy. What does that mean? Look at what this party was doing. Let me underline this part. He said, in the name of saving democracy, a Democratic Party set itself to dismantle it. Lacking confidence that its candidate could win a fair election at the voting booth, the DNC waged continual legal warfare against both President Trump and myself. This is RFK Jr. they were waging warfare against. He was running as a Democrat at the beginning. He tried to stay in the party. They did everything they could to shove him aside. Why? Because they can't control him the way they do the puppets that are in there right now. This is also why they hate Trump. Have you seen, let me ask you leftists, have you seen these pictures of the Clintons and the Bushes, Herbert Walker Bush and W, and the Obamas all palling around, all jovial lately? Have you seen these pictures of them all palling around? Do you think there's a big difference between the Bushes and the Obamas or the Clintons? Do you think the shadowy powers that be, do you think the three-letter agencies, the shadow government, do you think the deep state are threatened by any of those people? Do you think they were threatened by any of them? No. Do you think they're threatened by RFK? Yes. Do you think they're threatened by Trump? Yes. Trump and RFK couldn't be more different on many policy, not just policy positions, but on their view of the best way to run a country, their personal characteristics. Like, they have so many differences, and yet here's what they have in common. They are enemies of the deep state. I'm pretty sure. Sometimes I'm not entirely convinced. There's not anyone that they haven't gotten to, but I'm pretty sure neither of these guys are in the club. And so the Democratic Party did everything they could to keep him off the ballot. He says, lacking confidence that its candidate could win a fair election at the voting booth, the DNC waged continual legal warfare against both President Trump and myself. Each time that our volunteers turned in those towering boxes of the signatures needed to get on the ballot, the DNC dragged us into court, state after state, attempting to erase their work and to subvert the will of the voters who had signed those petitions. It deployed DNC-aligned judges to throw me and other candidates off the ballot. That's insane. Why are you still in this party? Is it pride? Is it a fragile sense of self or ego or what people will think of you, losing your social standing? Like, are you still in a prison, like a middle school kind of prison of like, oh, what names will they call me? Oh, but if my friends think I'm not a liberal anymore, who cares? Your friends aren't liberal. Your friends in the woke cult are not liberal. Who cares what they think? Lions do not care about the opinions of sheep. Are you a lion or are you a sheep? What kind of person are you? And if you're a man, let me ask you this. Are you a man or are you still a child? There's a lot of adult children walking around. A lot of them. In their 30s and 40s. Don't have any responsibility, don't have a family, don't own anything, don't own any property. Let a woman push them around, let a woman push them into woke. I'm not going to go off on this tangent right now, but there's a lot of you on the left, and I see you. And I think you know deep down, you're not a man. You're not a man. There is a mantle of responsibility that you have not yet taken on in your life. For some reason, we as a people, not just men, women too, we are maturing a lot later in this culture than we did in previous cultures and previous generations, previous iterations of humanity. We're growing up a lot later. A lot of that has to do with the economy and the way that the uniparty, the Bushes and the Obamas and the Clintons and this whole uniparty, the deep state, the way they've ruined the economy. Yes, a lot of it has to do with that. Yes, it's a lot harder to own a house now in your 20s and 30s. All of these things are true. At the same time, it's not just that. And there's a lot of you on the left. I know because I was one of you who have not grown up yet. Your children, your adult children walking around, no responsibility, no contentment, no peace with who you are, afraid of what other people think of you. Some of you are in your 30s and 40s and 50s, some of you in your 50s, and still put a lot of weight on what will my friends think if I take a stand and I leave the Democratic Party because it's no longer liberal. What will my friends think? You're 40. Grow up. Take on some responsibility. Take on some confidence by standing in something solid and firm in truth, by standing for something. If you're a liberal, then be a liberal. Woke is not liberal. The Democratic Party is not liberal. Be a liberal. Be a strong liberal. Stand for something. Stand against censorship. Stand against fascism, which is what the Democratic Party is today. Hey, Power Keg Greg. He says, all of my liberal friends left me. Haha. Here's the thing, though. You and I both know, Power Keg Greg, they're not liberals. They think they are, but they're not. The actual liberals have left the Democratic Party. We have left, and we are leaving, and we're still leaving. RFK just left in October. It is not a party of liberalism. I like what Brett Weinstein is doing, and he's been. I got to interview him 4 or 5 years ago about the Unity Party, and it seems like it's finally he's taking off. It's taking off. He's actually spreading this idea of the Unity Party, and I want to do future episodes on it. I want to read more about what they're doing, but I know he's got several people on board, including Russell Brand, like people who are RFK, people who are coming out to say, we need unity to save the republic and to save our democracy. We need unity. And this is people who are liberals, conservatives, who are libertarians and centrists and whatever. All of our differences, we have so many differences, but what we have in common is that we are not authoritarian, fascist, and communist like the modern left, like this huge cult that has taken over the Democratic Party and most of culture, taken over educational institutions, taken over academia. I mean, it started there, but taken over education and taken over entertainment and sports and everything. We are not that. And he's saying we need to come together in unity to save democracy and to save the republic. And I can get with this. I can vibe with this. It doesn't mean you have to become a Republican. I never became a Republican. If you have, and I know a lot of you do, if you're coming from the left, you have a lot of psychological barriers set up that prevent you from, your identity is tied into thinking of yourself in this way or that way. And there's certain things you can't do. I had a friend who voted for Trump in 2020 who called my husband, who's a super progressive friend, who voted for Trump and called my husband and was like, I feel like I did something taboo. I feel like I ate meat. I get it. Of course you would feel that way because of all the programming. You would feel that way. It's okay. You'll shed these things slowly. I want to say something and Scott Miller, look at this. He says, one of the saddest things is that so many do not or will not realize just how moderate Trump is. Oh yeah, they have no idea. Let me tell you, I'm pausing RFK's speech for a second. I'll tell you some things that I've been thinking and talking about. So if you look at studies, it is very true that the left and the right do not understand each other's positions very well. What I mean by that is people who are on the left, they have a hard time articulating correctly the opinions and policies of the right. They don't actually know what the right thinks, and vice versa. The people on the right have a hard time articulating the actual opinions and positions of people on the left. They don't know a lot of times what the left actually thinks. This is true. This has been true for decades. However, I had to moderate a panel discussion about this topic. And so I did a lot of research on this. This was a year or two ago. And I was looking at studies about this phenomenon, this being unable to articulate the opinions of the other side, to even know what they are. And about 40 years ago, 50 years ago, 40 or 50, they started, if you look at a chart, the lines started splitting apart. So it's much worse on the left. It's true that both sides have trouble articulating the opinions of the opposing side, but it's much worse on the left. It's gotten much worse on the left in the past 40 years. It's almost all of the left. They have a hard time accurately articulating and encapsulating the ideas of the right. They don't even know what the right thinks. Almost none of them. It's really bad. If you meet an average person on the right, I like to talk to people wherever we go. We're in Colorado right now. I like to talk to people. I like to talk to people, Democrats, Republicans, whatever. If I meet an average Republican and I ask them a few questions, they know generally what the policies of the left are. They can tell you, well, like right now they are pushing for Kamala's talking about price controls, right? They're talking about raising taxes and giving first-time home owners $25,000 to go towards buying a home, as if that's going to fix inflation, right? Like they know the policies. They can, in general, they can state what they are and why they oppose them. That's not true for all Republicans. I'm just saying, on average, they know some of the policies and they can tell you why they oppose them. Now, if you talk to an average leftist, pick a random one, they don't know what the right believes. They don't know what the policies are. They have been programmed for so many decades. They're completely detached from reality now. If you ask an average leftist, like, what is it about the right what don't you agree with about Trump or the right or whatever? Like, what don't you agree with? And they're like, they hate all black people and they want to kill all black people. What are you talking about? Can we come back to reality? They say crazy stuff like that. They would put all gay people in camps. What? 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 No. Can you, sir, can you please state a position of the right, and a real factual position of the right that you disagree with so we can have a conversation? Now, some of them will think that they've got a policy that you'll get to them to a place where they name something that they think is a policy, but because they're in that cult and they only listen to the cult media, that I used to be in that cult, they don't know what's in the bills and they haven't read them themselves and they believe what the cult media tells them. And so they will say, well, I know there was a bill that would make it illegal to say the word gay. It's like, what? No, there is no bill that says that. Or they'll say, they want to pass a bill to make all drag shows illegal. No, who told you this? I know who told you this, but this is not true. Where's the bill? Find me that bill. Find me that bill. There is no bill that says that. Oh my gosh, they believe the craziest stuff. And so you can't even have a conversation with them because they're arguing against something. They're arguing against something that the right doesn't even believe and is not pushing. So it's like a straw man. So how do you even, they're like, you will not pass this bill to ban all drag shows. And the right's like, yeah, we're not trying to. Okay. Okay. They don't know anything. Yeah, Project 2025. People in the chat, that's their new thing. The cult programming, the cult media has told them that. And they'll I'm sure some of you have interacted with this on Facebook and Twitter and elsewhere. They don't know anything. They'll just come in and go, Project 2025, huh? I disagree with Project 2025. And then you're like, what? Well, first of all, did you know that Project 2025 is not Trump's agenda? He has his own agenda. It's called Agenda 47. You can read it. I'm sure you would find things in it you don't agree with. You can go read that one. It's weird that they gave you this other one to like latch onto, but okay, it's not his agenda. But if you want to talk about it, then tell me what parts of it you disagree with. They don't know. They haven't read it. They don't know what's so alarming about it. They don't know anything. And this is not just hyperbole. This is true. Like I said, I looked at studies about this, about how the problem has gotten much worse on the left in the previous 3 or 4 decades. And whereas the number of people on the right who don't understand the policy of the left is kind of stayed consistent. There's a large portion who don't, but it hasn't been climbing. The left is like, they're just so detached from reality now. And how do you have conversations with people who are that detached from reality? It's hard. Like, I try to. My husband thinks I'm good at talking to people of all different beliefs. And sometimes I think I am. Sometimes I think I'm bad at it. It depends. But I still have trouble. I have trouble sometimes because they have built up such an imaginary straw man. So take any leftist that you know. I'm thinking of I'm still friends with several leftists. I'm thinking of a particular friend right now. Pick one, put one in your mind. Think of that friend. They have a certain image of a Trump voter or a Republican or MAGA. And they put all of this in the same bucket, by the way, all of it. Far right, they put it all in the same bucket. And they have an image of that person, of you maybe. And it's a very low resolution, grainy image. And it's almost like they're wearing glasses that are so clouded and foggy and clouded by propaganda and by ideology that they can't see you clearly. They just can see this grainy image. And they don't understand. We know what that image is. There's no revelation here. It's not a surprise to us. We know the caricature that you have of us. We know this. We know everything you think you know about us, and we know what's wrong with that image. And there's so much here. There's such a higher resolution image that we would like to share with you. There's so much more that we would like to talk with you about. And we would love to have conversations with you. And it's hard to do so because you want to talk to that low resolution image. And you want to have arguments with that low resolution image. Like, you should be able to say the word gay. And we're over here like, yeah, of course. Who are you talking to? Please come talk to us. And they're still arguing with themselves and with this phantom, with this fake image of you. They do this online on social media too. They'll come in and they'll say, you shouldn't ban all drag shows. And you're like, yeah, okay, I agree with you. It's hard. It's hard. It's hard because their glasses are so fogged up. They're so dirty. So I'm going to keep trying. And I'm going to keep trying to talk to people. And like this particular friend that I have in my mind's eye right now, who has this very low resolution image, I'm going to keep trying to talk to this friend. And I challenge you, if you're awake and you're watching this podcast and maybe you left the left like me. I see some of you who did. Hey, Jennifer. Maybe you've always been conservative. Maybe you've always been centrist or libertarian or whatever you are. I'm going to encourage you to keep trying to have these conversations. I know it's incredibly difficult. I have found it very trying myself. And you can't do it with everyone. Obviously, there's going to be certain leftists that are just not worth it, who are just toxic and hateful. But find the ones who have a grain, a modicum of open-mindedness left in them, who have a sliver of a good heart, that you can see, and try to have these conversations and try to help them see beyond that grainy image that they have of Trump voter. I'm going to take a second, just thank a couple people. KB, thank you. KB, who's been a member here for 7 months, says it's scary how people choose to be ignorant. Oh, yes. I think KB, a lot of people don't, I don't know if this is true for all of the people who are in the woke cult, but I think a certain percentage of them really like being farm animals. They like being slaves to government, to the elite, to the powers that be. I didn't used to realize that, but there's a certain percentage of people who really enjoy that. They like being told what to think and what to do. It may even be the majority of people. I don't know. I've been thinking a lot about this. The Ash conformity experiments, which I mention a lot, that kind of lends credibility to the idea that maybe a large portion of people enjoy being led. Thank you for that. Mario for $5. Thank you, Mario, says, remember the phrase, fools are soon parted with their money. I think we need to add freedoms and rights to that list. Oh, yeah. Fools are soon parted from their freedoms and rights. Yes. Keep hope, pray, and vote, people. Mario, I couldn't agree more. Fools are soon parted with their freedoms and rights. Here's an interesting thing that they do. And isn't this amazing? These psychopaths at the top who are running the Democratic Party, who run the media, who run academia, who, the ones who are pushing woke and social justice or using it for power. They're such good manipulators. They get the people who are on the left, they get them to demand their own oppression. They get them to go out in the street and march for their own oppression. Isn't that insane? Like, for their own repression. Think about it. When I was in Europe last year, I got to go with my husband for his band, for his tour. It was great. We saw a protest there. We saw, it was an old school peace protest. And it was a lot of older people, a lot of hippies, older hippies. And it was anti-war protest. And I started thinking about it because at the same time, there was a lot of the climate change stuff happening in Europe. There still is, right? And all these young people who super glue themselves to streets and throw oil and tomato juice on paintings in museums, and these just really disgusting climate change young protesters. And I started thinking about the difference between the older hippies and the young climate protesters. If you think about it, these young climate protesters, they are doing the exact opposite of the old hippies. They are in the streets saying, govern me harder, daddy. Like, that is what they're saying. That's what their signs should say. They're saying, take away more of my rights, daddy government. That's what they're doing. They're out there saying, give us more restrictions and regulations, government. Take away more of our individual rights, government. Isn't that crazy? That's the world we're in now. They're out there saying, restrict my rights harder. Give me less freedom, government. Give me less rights, government. That's the young people that we've programmed today. That's the Greta Thunbergs. That's the David Hoggs. The Red Guard, like Mao's Red Guard, child soldiers. Govern us harder, daddy. That's who they are. John Thomas for $10. Thank you, John. Says, I saw that on Instagram, but it was an account that steals stuff, so no idea who made it up. It had an AI picture of Bill Gates, him, Bezos, Cuban, Buffett, Schwab, all fit the description. Oh, you're talking about the word. What did you call it? Not psychopath. It was a new word. Philanthropath. I like that word. Keto and Crime. Hey, Tracy, for $5. Thanks for supporting the channel. Tracy says MAGA and RFK for people, Dems equals feudal houses, choosing successors. Simple as that. Oh, she says MAGA and RFK are for the people, but the Democrats are basically feudal houses choosing successors. Yes, they are. They are. I want to play you the other second part of this, not the whole speech, but there's one other part where he's talking about how they just chose the successor. Tracy. Like, they just chose Kamala. They just selected her. There's no election. Tracy again, $10. Thank you, Tracy. Says, in a country with multi-party systems, both Trump and RFK would be a third and fourth party entirely. But here we have to operate within this uniparty system. Yeah. I wish we had multiple options. Alex. Hey, Alex, for $9.99. Good to see you, dude. He says, I don't mind people not liking Trump. I get it. It's just not a black or white thing. Just look at what the Dem elite did to RFK Jr., Tulsi, Marianne, yeah, and other Democratic candidates. It's a mess. Yes. They smear all of them. They smear any of the ones who think for themselves and go against the cult. They've done it to Cornel West, Tulsi, like you said, Marianne Williamson. They'll do it to any person on the left who gets out of lockstep with that cult. Hey, Randy. Good to see you here, Randy. For $10, says a few bucks for Tiger. Buy him a road trip treat. We love you, Randy. Hello from me and Anthony from the road. Thanks for hanging out today. And I'm not telling Tiger that you gave me that 10. I'm keeping it. Okay, I'm joking. He knows already. Tiger's my accountant. Tiger's the boss of this van. Okay, so here, look at this. Let's get back to this part. So he was just talking about how the DNC waged a continual legal battle against him and President Trump, trying to keep them off the ballot. How he had to pay for lawyers to go into court in every state. They're trying to take him off the ballot. And they were deploying DNC aligned judges to throw him off the ballot, and to do everything they could to subvert democracy. That's what the Democratic Party stands for today. And then this is the second part of that paragraph. Here we go. Let's see if you can see this. Oh, it says that we lost connection to audio. If you can't hear this, I'm going to read it to you. It might be faster anyway. Can you guys hear this? Can you guys hear that or no? Okay, I'm just going to read it. Here we go. So he says, it deployed, he's talking about the Democratic Party, it deployed DNC-aligned judges to throw me and other candidates off the ballot and to throw President Trump in jail. It ran a sham primary that was rigged to prevent any serious challenge to President Biden. Then, when a predictably awful debate performance precipitated a palace coup against President Biden, and it was a coup. That's me adding that. It was, but he calls it that too. When a predictably awful debate performance precipitated a palace coup against President Biden, the same shadowy DNC operatives appointed his successor, also without an election. Again, any Democrats who are listening, any leftists, what are you guys doing? What are you doing? You watched, your party just had a coup and they appointed your nominee. What are you doing? So he says, then when a predictably awful debate performance precipitated a palace coup against President Biden, the same shadowy DNC operatives appointed his successor, also without an election. They installed a candidate who was so unpopular with voters that she dropped out in 2020 without winning a single delegate. How's this about democracy? She was so unpopular with voters, she didn't even win one delegate. She's never won a primary, and you just appointed her. He says, my uncle and my father both relished debate. They prided themselves on their capacity to go toe-to-toe with any opponent in a battle of ideas. They would be astonished to learn of a Democratic Party presidential nominee who, like Vice President Harris, has not appeared in a single interview or an unscripted encounter with voters for 35 days. This is profoundly undemocratic. How are people to judge when they don't know whom they are choosing? And how can this look to the rest of the world? Let me answer you, RFK. Let me answer you. How are people to judge when they don't know who they're choosing? These monsters on the left, these monsters at the top, these elite, these shadowy DNC figures, the three-letter agencies, all of them, they know that the leftist cult just pulls the blue lever. It doesn't matter. They knew they could do a coup. They could appoint her. They could appoint anyone, and that these sheep would go into and just hit blue no matter what. Did you see Quentin Tarantino's interview on Bill Maher, where he's sitting there talking about, I don't care what she says, I don't care what she does, I don't care what she supports. Quentin Tarantino was like, it doesn't matter to me anything she thinks or says or does or wants to do. I'm voting for her. They just admit it. They just say it outright. None of it's based on reason, facts, argumentation. They have no reason. It's entirely fantasy, religion, faith, cult stuff. It is cult stuff. That is a cult member saying, I don't care what you say or do or believe. I'm voting for you no matter what. That's crazy. So how are people to judge when they don't know who they're choosing? Well, a cult doesn't need you to know who you're choosing. They just give you the figure. They give you the figurehead. Vote for this figurehead. And the culties do. The culties do. Bros and bros, what happened? Oh, I'm not sure. What are you talking about? Is my sound still here? Or let me know what you mean. If there's something that like when I was muted for 20 minutes. Or okay. Let me know if there's something going wrong. Let me know. I'm on the road, so I'm a little flummoxed. I'll fight you naked. Hey, you changed your avatar. Good to see you. I'll fight you naked for $2. Says RFK is the best Dallas Butler insurance. Ooh, isn't he? Bros and Bros says, I was lamenting my childhood heroes. Oh, when you said what happened? Oh, yeah. Yeah, Quentin Tarantino, right? What a bummer. I think he's a brilliant filmmaker, but sadly, he can be a brilliant filmmaker and also be in a cult. That's true for a lot of people. It's the same cult I was in. You never know. You always hope these people, the ones that are public names, that are have a high profile, like people like Quentin Tarantino, for example. You always hope one day they'll leave the cult. Like one day they'll get it. Let's see if I can find that interview. Oh yeah, it is. Here it is. We can watch the clip if you want, but I'm going to tell you, this is what he said. This is what Quentin Tarantino said to Bill Maher. He said, this is about effing winning. What most people don't give the Democrats enough credit for, but we give the Republicans credit for, it's like, no, sometimes it's just about effing winning. And it doesn't matter how we look at this moment. It's about effing winning. This is about effing winning. It's a mad effing dash, and she is running, and she's not stopping to effing stumble. I'm going to vote for her effing anyway, no matter what she says in a stupid effing interview. So don't F this shit up. I'm probably not going to play it because there's a lot of F words in there. But he was basically saying, I'm going to vote for her no matter what. I'm going to vote for her no matter what. Okay, let's continue to RFK's speech. He says, my father and my uncle were always conscious of America's image abroad because of our nation's role as the template for democracy, a role model for democratic processes, and the leader of the free world. Instead of showing us her substance and character, the DNC and its media organs engineered a surge of popularity for Vice President Harris based on nothing, no policies, no interviews, no debates, only smoke and mirrors and balloons in a highly produced circus. There, in Chicago, a string of Democratic speakers mentioned Donald Trump 147 times just on the first day. Who needs a policy when you have Trump to hate? In contrast, at the RNC convention, President Biden was mentioned only twice in 4 days. You guys, think about that. Again, if you're awake, you know this is the case. But if you're not awake, if you're in the woke world, if you're in that cult and you're watching, you guys are crazy obsessed with him. They have really manipulated you. They have really manipulated you where they can just say his name and it's like Pavlov's dog and they get you to do whatever they want. They said his name 147 times just on the first day of their convention, 147 times. At the RNC, they only said Biden's name 2 times, and that was in 4 days. RFK continues. He says, I do interviews every day. Many of you have interviewed me. Anybody who asks gets to interview me. Some days I do as many as 10. President Trump, who actually was nominated and won an election, also does interviews daily. How did the Democratic Party choose a candidate that has never done an interview or debate during the entire election cycle? We know the answers. It did it by weaponizing the government agencies. It did it by abandoning democracy. It did it by suing the opposition and by disenfranchising American voters. What most alarms me isn't how the Democratic Party conducts its internal affairs or runs its candidates. What alarms me is the resort to censorship, media control, and weaponization of the federal agencies. Yes. When a US president colludes with or outright coerces media companies to censor political speech, it is an attack on our most sacred right of free expression. And that's the very right upon which all of our other constitutional rights rest. This is so true. This makes me want to cry because he's talking about the death of the Democratic Party and everything it stood for and how it's for the opposite now of everything that it stood for. And it does make me want to cry. He says President Biden mocked Vladimir Putin's 88% landslide in the Russian elections, observing that Putin and his party controlled the Russian press and that Putin prevented serious opponents from appearing on the ballot. But here in America, the DNC also prevented opponents from appearing on the ballot. Thank you, Democrats. That's me interjecting. Thank you, Democrats. You're just like Putin. He continues, and our television networks expose themselves as Democratic Party organs. Over the course of more than a year in a campaign where my poll numbers reached at times in the high 20s, the DNC-aligned mainstream media networks maintained a near-perfect embargo on interviews with me. So not only do they not bother interviewing the Democratic nominee, who's not even, she's the appointee. She wasn't elected. The voters didn't choose her, but they don't interview her. They don't think the voters need to hear from her, but they also refuse to run interviews that RFK has given and has offered freely, wanting to contribute to the discourse, wanting to answer questions. They won't run them. They censor. He says during his 10-month presidential campaign in 1992, Ross Perot gave 34 interviews on mainstream networks. In contrast, during the 16 months since I declared, ABC, NBC, CBS, MSNBC, and CNN combined only gave 2 live interviews with me. 2. So he's comparing Ross Perot, who was also a third-party candidate, who did 34 interviews in 1992 during a 10-month campaign, 34 interviews during a 10-month campaign. He was given 2 during his 16-month campaign, 2 interviews on the mainstream networks, because the mainstream networks are an arm. The media is an arm of the Democratic Party. He says those networks instead, they ran a continuous deluge. Hit pieces They did hit pieces on him instead. Hit pieces with inaccurate, often vile pejoratives and defamatory smears. Some of those same networks then colluded with the DNC to keep me off the debate stage. Again, I ask you, if you're on the left and you're watching this, what happened to your party? What happened to my old party? What happened to my democracy? What happened to democracy? Is that just a word? It means nothing to you? Clearly, it means nothing to you. Clearly, it means nothing to you. I've gotten to the point where when I hear a leftist say democracy, I want to say, keep that word out of your mouth. It's like a Satanist using the name of God. So he continues, he said, representatives of those networks are in this room right now. And I'll just take a moment to ask you to consider the many ways that your institutions have abdicated this really sacred responsibility. It's the duty of a free press to safeguard democracy and to challenge always the party in power. Instead of maintaining that posture of fierce skepticism towards authority, your institutions and media made themselves government mouthpieces and stenographers for the organs of power. You didn't alone cause the devolution of American democracy, but you could have prevented it. Oh my God, this is a great speech. This is a great speech. He says the Democratic Party's censorship of social media was even more of a naked exercise of executive power. This week, a federal judge, Terry Doty, upheld my injunction against President Biden, calling the White House's censorship project, quote, the most egregious violation of the First Amendment in the history of the United States of America. His previous 155-page decision details how just 37 hours after he took the oath of office, swearing to uphold the Constitution, President Biden and his White House opened up a portal and invited the CIA, the FBI, the CISA, which is a censorship agency, the Center of the Censorship Industrial Complex, DHS, the IRS, and other agencies to censor me and other political dissidents on social media. Again, leftists, where the F are you? Why haven't you read the Twitter files? Why haven't you read this? Why don't you know about this, what your party's doing? You claim to care about fascism, but you don't. You support a fascist party. If you cared about fascism, you would leave that party like I did. He says, even today, users who try to post my campaign videos to Facebook and YouTube get messages that this content violates community standards. 2 days after Judge Doty rendered his decision this week, Facebook was still attaching warning labels to an online petition calling on ABC to include me in the upcoming debate. They said that it violates their community standards. You guys, we are living in 1984. Again, when I talk to people on the left, sometimes you guys, you're so detached from reality and you don't even know all the censorship that's been happening on big social at the behest of government, which is fascism. You don't even know about that for the past 4, 5, 6 years. You don't even know. It's sick stuff. And you should know about it so you can decide if you want to keep supporting it or not, because right now you're supporting it. The mainstream media was once the guardian of the First Amendment and democratic principles, but has since joined this systemic attack on democracy. Also, the media justifies their censorship on the grounds of combating misinformation. But governments and oppressors don't censor lies. They don't fear lies. They fear the truth. And that's what they censor. Underline it, set it on fire. That sentence is true. They fear the truth, and that's what they censor. I don't want any of this to sound like a personal complaint, he says, because it's not. For me, it's all part of a journey, and it's a journey I signed up for. But I need to make these observations because I think they're critical for us doing the thing we need to do as citizens in a democracy to assess where we are in this country and what our democracy still looks like, and the assumptions about US leadership and the globe. Are we really still a role model for democracy in this country, or have we made it kind of a joke? Here's the good news. Although mainstream outlets denied me a critical platform, it did not shut down my ideas, which have especially flourished among young voters and independent voters thanks to the alternative media. Many months ago, I promised the American people that I would withdraw from the race if I became a spoiler and altered the outcome of the election, but I had no chance of winning. In my heart, I no longer believe that I have a realistic path to electoral victory in the face of this relentless, systematic censorship and media control. So I cannot, in good conscience, ask my staff and volunteers to keep working their long hours or ask my donors to keep giving when I cannot honestly tell them that I have a real path to the White House. Furthermore, our polling consistently showed that by staying on the ballot in the battleground states, I would likely hand the election over to the Democrats, with whom I disagree on the most existential issues: censorship, war, and chronic disease. I want everyone to know that I'm not terminating my campaign. I'm simply suspending it and not ending it. My name will remain on the ballot in most states. If you live in a blue state, you can vote for me without harming or helping President Trump or Vice President Harris. In red states, the same will apply. I encourage you to vote for me. And if enough of you do vote for me, and neither of the major party candidates win 270 votes, which is quite possible, in fact, today our polling shows them tying at 269, I could conceivably still end up in the White House in a contention election. But in about 10 battleground states where my presence would be a spoiler, I'm going to remove my name. So he's taken his name off the ballot in those battleground states. I'm going to remove my name, and I've already started that process. And I urge voters not to vote for me in those states. This is beautiful. This is what this sacrifice that he's doing to try and save our democracy, to try and save the republic. It's beautiful. He says, it's with a sense of victory and not defeat that I'm suspending my campaign activities. Not only did we do the impossible by collecting 1 million signatures, we changed the national political conversation forever. Chronic disease, free speech, government corruption, and breaking our addiction to war have moved to the center of politics. And so I can say to all who have worked so hard for the last year and a half, thank you for a job well done. 3 great causes drove me to enter this race in the first place primarily, and these are the principal causes that persuaded me to leave the Democratic Party and run as an independent, and now to throw my support to President Trump. The causes were: number 1, free speech; number 2, the war in Ukraine; and number 3, the war on our children. I've already described some of my personal experiences and struggles with the government censorship industrial complex. I want to say a word about the Ukraine war. The military-industrial complex has provided us with that familiar comic book justification, like they do on every war. And this one is a noble effort to stop a supervillain, Vladimir Putin, from invading the Ukraine and to thwart his Hitler-like march across Europe. In fact, tiny Ukraine is a proxy in a geopolitical struggle initiated by the ambitions of the US neocons for American global hegemony. I'm not excusing Putin for invading Ukraine. He had other options. But the war is Russia's predictable response to the reckless neocon project of extending NATO to encircle Russia, a hostile act. The credulous media rarely explain to Americans that we unilaterally walked away from 2 intermediate nuclear weapons treaties with Russia and then put nuclear missile systems in Romania and Poland. This is a hostile act. And the Biden White House repeatedly spurned Russia's offer to settle this war peacefully. The Ukraine war began in 2014, when U.S. agencies overthrew the democratically elected government of Ukraine and installed a handpicked pro-Western government. They launched a deadly civil war against ethnic Russians in Ukraine. In 2019, America walked away from a peace treaty, the Minsk Agreement, that had been negotiated between Russia and Ukraine by European nations. And then, in April of 2022, we wanted the war. In April of 2022, President Biden sent Boris Johnson to Ukraine to force President Zelensky to tear up a peace agreement that he and the Russians had already signed. The Russians were withdrawing troops from Kiev, Donbass, and Luhansk, and the peace agreement would have brought peace to the region and would have allowed them to remain part of Ukraine. President Biden stated that month that his objective in the war was regime change in Russia. His Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin simultaneously explained that America's purpose in the war was to exhaust the Russian army and to degrade its capacity to fight anywhere else in the world. These objectives, of course, had nothing to do with what they were telling Americans about protecting Ukraine's sovereignty. Ukraine is a victim in this war, and it is a victim of the West, both Russia and the West. Since then, we have forced Zelensky to tear up the agreement. We've squandered the flower of Ukrainian youth. As many as 600,000 Ukrainian kids and over 100,000 Russian kids, all of whom we should be mourning, have died. And Ukraine's infrastructure is destroyed. War has been a disaster for our country as well. We've squandered nearly $200 billion already. And these are badly needed dollars in our suffering communities all over our country. The Nord Stream pipeline sabotage and the sanctions have destroyed Europe's industrial base, which formed the bulwark of U.S. national security. A strong Germany with a strong industry is a much, much stronger deterrent to Russia than a Germany that is deindustrialized and turned into just an extension of a U.S. military base. We've pushed Russia into a disastrous alliance with China and Iran. We are closer to the brink of nuclear exchange than at any time since 1962. The neocons in the White House don't seem to care at all. Our moral authority and our economy are in shambles, and the war gave rise to the emergence of BRICS, which now threatens to replace the dollar as a global reserve currency. This is a first-class calamity for our country. Judging by the bellicose, belligerent speech last night in Chicago, we can assume that President Harris will be an enthusiastic advocate for this and other neocon military adventures. President Trump says he will reopen negotiations with President Putin and end the war overnight as soon as he becomes president. This alone would justify my support for his campaign. That was quite a bit, so I'm going to pause there and see if we got the sound back on that video. That was an epic statement. Yes, it was. This is just a great speech. I wish people on the left would read it. I wish they would. I hope they listen. I hope they listen. You know, they claim to be anti-war. They don't know any of this. Nothing they say, it's like almost everything they say is just surface level. It's all skin deep. They don't know what democracy means. They don't think about it. They're supporting a party that's anti-democracy. They say they're anti-war, but they're supporting war hawks. They're supporting a party that's pro-war. They say they're anti-corporations, anti-big pharma, but they're supporting a company that's pro-big pharma and pro-corporations. Like, they say they're anti-fascism, but they're supporting a party that's fascist. Like, it's like they don't think about anything, what anything means. It's just words are tools for power. That's it. Power manipulation. They don't actually have meaning. There's no meaning. These people live a surface level life. I'm going to see if we got the sound back on this video here. Tell me if you guys can hear this. Could you guys hear that? Nope. Okay. That's okay. Yeah, there's a problem with my sound. That's okay. I'm going to read some more portions of this. I'm going to skip a little bit. We're not going to read the whole thing. I want to thank Randy. Hey, Randy, again for $5. Randy Wallen says, my childhood heroes were my dad, my grandpa, John Wayne, Ronald Reagan, John Gage, Emergency, and Jim Rockford. Still comfortable with all of them. Your childhood heroes are squarely in place, is what you're saying. Quentin Tarantino didn't make Randy's list. That's good. That's good. Thank you, Randy. Hey, since you were a fan of John Wayne, I have to tell you, we are staying in a place called the Snowshoe Lodge in Creede, Colorado. And apparently it's famous because John Wayne used to stay here. And they have a John Wayne room. We're not in the John Wayne room. But anyway, I just thought that was interesting. Okay, what time is it? We got to check out soon. So I don't know how much more of the speech I can do. I think we have a good 15 minutes. Let's hit the important parts. Let's get to some more of the important parts. The anti-war stuff is really important, though. I mean, that's huge. Where he said, you know, President Trump would get us out of this mess. He would end this war immediately, and that's enough alone. That alone is enough to justify me supporting him. And if you are on the left and you claim to be anti-war, it should be enough for you to support him too. Despite all the names you're going to get called and the playground stuff and the middle school stuff and, oh no, what do people think of me? And by the way, let me tell you this. If you have any doubts at all, if you're on the left and you're listening to what I'm saying, what other people are saying, and if this resonates with you, but it causes a psychological disturbance inside of you because you don't know, you're like, why am I agreeing with this woman? And why am I agreeing with Trump? You know, let me tell you this. Nobody has to know who you voted for. Okay? You can go in that voting booth and you can vote for Trump and you don't have to tell anyone. If you're at that stage of fear, you don't have to tell anyone. You don't have to be like me. I'm telling people because, I mean, I don't have anything to lose. I'm at a different stage of leaving the left than you are. I started leaving in 2016. I was in that fearful place where fear froze me for about 6 months. And I get it. But I left that place after 6 months and I'm not there anymore. So I can be one of the people who says, this is what I'm doing. I can be one of the people who says, F it, I'm getting the MAGA hat. Screw them. But you don't have to do that. You can vote your conscience and you can stay quiet about it, and that's okay. Therese says, go agree with the like button, please. Thank you very much, Therese. Yeah, if you like this episode, hit the like button. It helps the video to get out to more people. I really want to get the videos out to more people on the left leading up to the election. So if you have people you think you could send this to who are on the left who might listen to it, please do. Okay, we just read through a lot of the anti-war stuff that RFK talked about in his speech. Now he's talking about, he said the three main issues for him were free speech, anti-war, and opposing the war on children. Okay, so here he says, last summer, it looked like no candidate was willing to negotiate a quick end to the Ukraine war, to tackle the chronic disease epidemic, to protect free speech and our constitutional freedoms, to clean corporate influence out of our government, or defy the neocons and their agenda of endless military adventurism. But now one of the two candidates has adopted these issues as his own, to the point where he is asked to enlist me in his administration. I am speaking, of course, of Donald Trump. Less than 2 hours after President Trump narrowly escaped assassination, they tried to kill him. Let me remind you of that because they want us to forget. They tried to kill him. Okay, less than 2 hours after President Trump narrowly escaped assassination, Callie Means called me on my cell phone. I was in Las Vegas. Callie's arguably the leading advocate for food safety, for soil regeneration, and for ending the chronic disease epidemic that is destroying America's health and ruining our economy. Callie has exposed the insidious corruption at the FDA, the NIH, the HHS, and the USDA that has caused the epidemic. Callie's been working on and off for my campaign and advising me on subjects since the beginning. Those subjects have been my primary focus for the last 20 years. I was delighted when Cowley told me that he had also been advising President Trump. He told me that President Trump was anxious to talk to me about chronic disease and other subjects and to explore avenues of cooperation. Then he asked if I would take a call from the president. President Trump telephoned me a few minutes later, and I met with him the following day. A few weeks later, I met again with President Trump and his family members and close advisors in Florida. And in a series of long, intense discussions, I was surprised to discover that we were aligned on many key issues. And in those meetings, he suggested that we join forces as a unity party. We talked about Abraham Lincoln's team of rivals. That arrangement would allow us to disagree publicly and privately and fiercely, if need be, on issues over which we differ, and also to work together on the existential issues upon which we are in concordance. I was a ferocious critic of many of the policies during his first administration, and there are still issues and approaches upon which we continue to have very serious differences. But we are aligned with each other on key issues like ending forever wars, ending the childhood disease epidemic, securing the border, protecting freedom of speech, unraveling the corporate capture of our regulatory agencies, and getting the U.S. intelligence agencies out of the business of propagandizing and censoring and surveilling Americans and interfering with our elections. So important. Leftists, this is so important. Following my first discussion with President Trump, I tried unsuccessfully to open similar discussions with Vice President Harris. Vice President Harris declined to meet or to even speak with me. Wow. Wow. Not interested. Not interested. Suspending my candidacy is a heart-rending decision for me, but I am convinced that it is the best hope for ending the Ukraine war, ending the chronic disease epidemic that is eroding our nation's vitality from the inside, and for finally protecting free speech. I feel a moral obligation to use this opportunity to save millions of American children above all things. In case some of you don't realize how dire the condition is, or children's health and chronic disease are in general, I would urge you to view Tucker Carlson's recent interview with Callie Means and his sister, Dr. Casey Means, who was the top graduate of her class at Stanford Medical School. This is an issue that affects all of us, far more directly and urgently than any culture war issue, as well as the other issues that we obsess over that are tearing apart our country. This is the most important issue. Therefore, it has the potential to bring us together. So let me share a little bit about why I believe it's so urgent. Okay, so this is, if you don't know, if you're on the left and you haven't been paying attention, RFK's, his pet thing, his big thing is health, is ending chronic disease. It's a return to natural foods. It's anti-big pharma. It's all the stuff that have been poisoning us with for generations. It's getting all that stuff out of our food. So here he's about to talk about why this is so important to him, why for him this is the number one issue. It doesn't mean it has to be the number one issue for you, but it's very admirable to listen to, this is what this guy cares about. So he says, today we spend more on healthcare than any country on earth, twice what we pay in Europe, twice what they pay in Europe. And yet we have the worst health outcomes of any nation in the world. We are about 79th in health outcomes, behind Costa Rica, Nicaragua, Mongolia. We're behind Mongolia, guys. We are behind Mongolia and other countries. Nobody has a chronic disease burden like we do. During the COVID epidemic, we had the highest body count of any country in the world. We had 16% of the COVID deaths, even though we only have 4.2% of the world's population. The CDC says that's because we are the sickest people on earth. We have the highest chronic disease rate on earth. And the average American who died from COVID had, on average, 3.8 chronic diseases already, 3.8. So these were people who had immune system collapses, who had mitochondrial dysfunction. And no other country has anything like this. 2/3 of American adults and children suffer from chronic health issues. 50 years ago, that number was less than 1%. Okay, did you hear that? Let's underline this. 50 years ago, less than 1% of Americans suffered from chronic health issues. That was 50 years ago, less than 1%. 50 years ago, less than 1%. Today, 50 years later, 2/3. 2/3 of Americans suffer from chronic health issues. That's insane. So we've gone from 1% to 66% in 50 years. In America, 74% of Americans are now overweight or obese. 74% obese, including 50% of our children, 50% of our kids, fat. 120 years ago, when somebody was obese, they were sent to the circus. There were case reports about them. Obesity was almost unknown. In Japan, the childhood obesity rate is 3% compared to our 50%. Here, half of Americans have prediabetes or type 2 diabetes. When my uncle was president, when I was a boy, juvenile diabetes was effectively non-existent. A typical pediatrician would see one case of diabetes during his entire 40 or 50-year career. Today, 1 out of every 3 kids, 1 out of every 3 who walks into his office is diabetic or pre-diabetic. And the mitochondrial disorder that causes diabetes is also causing Alzheimer's, which is now classified as diabetes. And it's costing this country more than our military budget every year. There's been an explosion of neurological illnesses that I never saw as a kid. ADD, ADHD, speech delay, language delay, Tourette's syndrome, narcolepsy, ASD, Asperger's, autism. In the year 2000, the autism rate was 1 in 1,500. Now, okay, so just 24 short years later, now autism rates in kids, it's 1 in 36. It went from 1 in 1,500 to 1 in 36 in 24 years. What is happening? According to the CDC, that's their numbers. Nobody's talking about how 1 in every 22 kids in California has autism. 1 in every 22 kids in California supposedly has autism now. And this is a crisis that 77% of our kids are too disabled to serve in the US military. That's a crisis. What is happening to our country? And why isn't this in the headlines every single day? There's nobody else in the world that is experiencing it. This is only happening in America. And by the way, there's been no change in diagnosis, which the industry sometimes like to say that there's been no change in screening. This is a change in incidence. In my generation, 70-year-old men, the odds and rates are about 1 in 10,000. And in my kids' generation, 1 in 34. This is RFK speaking, if you're just tuning in. He says, I repeat, in California, 1 in 22 kids, autism. Why are we letting this happen? Why are we allowing this to happen to our children? These are the most precious assets that we have in this country. How can we let this happen to them? About 18% of American teens have fatty liver disease. That's like 1 out of every 5. That disease, when I was a kid, only affected late-stage alcoholics who were elderly. Now it's like 1 out of every 5 kids. Cancer rates are skyrocketing in the young and the old. Young adult cancers are up 79%, and 1 in 4 American women is on antidepressants. We've talked about this before. For white women, it's out of control. SSRIs. They're just dependent on these antidepressants, on these pharmaceuticals. Just out of their minds on it. You can't tell me 1 in 4 people need that. I know it helps some people. It is massively overprescribed. We have a dependency issue in this country. This is me speaking, not him. I'll continue where I left off. He says, young adult cancers are up 79%, and 1 in 4 American women is on antidepressant medication. 40% of teens have a mental health diagnosis. 40% of teens have a mental health diagnosis. 15% of high schoolers are on Adderall. 15% of high schoolers on Adderall. 500,000 children on SSRIs. So what's causing all this suffering? I'll name 2 culprits. First, and the worst, is ultra-processed foods. 70% of American children's diet is ultra-processed, which means industrially manufactured in a factory. These foods consist primarily of processed sugar, ultra-processed grains, and seed oils. My husband's back in the room now. I just got to give him a shout out because he's laughing. He has become so determined to root seed oils out of our diet because he because he loves me and cares about me, because he cares about this issue. And he got turned on to this, reading about it and reading about all the stuff that goes into food. And The Ancestral Diet is the book. He's saying you should read The Ancestral Diet. And so he has been baking. He mills his own flour, free from all the additives and everything that they strip out of it and then add back in. And he makes pure his own flour, bakes delicious bread. I love my husband, and I love that he cares enough about our health to get us off the seed oils. And seriously, you should go and read this book if you care about this. He's not wrong. I know this seems like something that people kind of push to the side, like, oh, health, there's so many other pressing issues. Health, he's not wrong. This may not be the one that the issue I am most compelled to speak about. For me, it's my old ideology. It's woke. That's where I came from. That's what's important to me. That's what I'm compelled to speak on. But I'm happy this is his issue. He's not wrong. We do have an epidemic. I'm sure you see it. You go to the store and you look around and everybody's obese. The children, that's the most sad. The children are obese. It's not normal to have 40% of kids with a mental health disorder. That's not normal. That's abnormal. That's the definition of abnormal. To have them on SSRIs, it's abnormal. Okay, I'm going to continue here. He says, these ultra-processed foods consist primarily of processed sugar, ultra-processed grains, and seed oils. Laboratory scientists, many of whom formerly worked for the cigarette industry, which purchased all the big food companies in the 1970s and 80s, deployed thousands of scientists to invent new chemicals to make the food more addictive. And these ingredients did not exist 100 years ago. Humans are not biologically adapted to eat them. Hundreds of these chemicals are now banned in Europe, but they are ubiquitous in American processed foods. I'll tell you that too. Having gone to Europe last year with my husband, the food there is better. You can find natural food there. It's not ultra processed. The bread, they have regulations there that the bread is good. It's very different. When our German friend's son came to visit the US for the first time, he was 19. We took him to the bakery at one of our good HEBs, our fancy HEBs. If you're in Texas, the fancy ones. And I was like, this is some of our good bread. And he was laughing. He was like, no, this is not good bread, Keri. This young kid laughing at us. But it's true. These chemicals are ubiquitous in American processed foods. He continues, the second culprit is toxic chemicals in our food, our medicine, and our environment. Pesticides, food additives, pharmaceutical drugs, and toxic waste permeate every cell of our bodies. This assault on our children's cells and hormones is unrelenting. And to name just one problem, many of these chemicals increase estrogen. Because young children are ingesting so many of these hormone disruptors, America's puberty rate is now occurring at age 10 to 13, which is 6 years earlier. 6 years earlier than girls were reaching puberty in the year 1900. Our country has the earliest puberty rates of any continent on the earth. And no, this is not because of better nutrition. This is not normal. Breast cancer is also estrogen driven, and it now strikes 1 in 8 women, breast cancer. We are mass poisoning all of our children and our adults. Considering the grievous human cause of this tragic epidemic of chronic disease, it seems almost crass to mention the damage it does to our economy, but I'll say it is crippling the nation's finances. When my uncle was president, our country spent $0 on chronic disease. Today, government healthcare spending is almost all for chronic disease, and it's double the military budget, and it's the fastest growing budget item on the federal budget. Chronic disease costs more to the economy as a whole, at least $4 trillion, which is 5 times our military budget. And that's a 20% drag on everything we do and everything we aspire to. Poor and minority communities suffer disproportionately. People worry about DEI or about bigotry of any kind. This dwarfs anything. We are poisoning the poor. We are systematically poisoning minorities across this country. Industry lobbyists have made sure that most of the food stamp lunch program, about 70% of food stamps and 70 or 77% of school lunches are processed foods. There's no vegetables, There's nothing that you would want to eat. We're just poisoning the poor citizens. And that's why they have the highest chronic disease burden of any demographic in our country and the highest in the world. The same food industry lobbied to make sure that nearly all agricultural subsidies go to commodity crops that are the feedstock of processed food industry. These policies are destroying small farms and they're destroying our soil. We give about 8 times as much in subsidies to tobacco than we do to fruits and vegetables. It makes no sense if we want a healthy country. The good news is that we can change all of this and we can change it very, very, very quickly. America can get healthy again. He should do a hat that says "Make America Healthy Again," right? To do that, we need to do 3 things. First, we need to root out the corruption in our health agencies. Second, we need to change the incentives in our healthcare system. And third, we need to inspire Americans to get healthy again. 80% of NIH grants go to people who have conflicts of interest. These are the people, virtually everybody who Joe Biden just appointed to the new panel at the NIH to decide food recommendations. They're all people who are from the industry. They're all people who are from the processed food companies. They're deciding what Americans hear is healthy. The recommendations on the food pyramid, what goes into our school lunch programs, what goes to the food stamp programs, they're all corrupted and conflicted individuals. These agencies, the FDA, the USDA, the CDC, all of them are controlled by giant for-profit corporations. Again, leftists, let me spell something out for you. Do you understand what this is? He's talking about the government and the corporations working hand in hand to deceive the people and to subvert your individual rights and to poison you and literally kill you. This is fascism. I know you talk about fascism a lot and you haven't looked it up in a long time. Go look it up. This is fascism. This is government and private corporations working hand in hand to subvert the will of the people. It doesn't just happen with censorship and big social. It happens with these 3-letter agencies in our health and food. He says 75% of the FDA funding does not come from taxpayers. It comes from pharma. Pharma. Gross. And pharma executives and consultants and lobbyists cycle in and out of these agencies. With President Trump's backing, I'm going to change that. We are going to staff these agencies with honest scientists and doctors who are free from industry funding. We're going to make sure the decisions of consumers, doctors, and patients are informed by unbiased science. A sick child is the best thing for the pharmaceutical industry. When American children or adults are sick with a chronic condition, they're put on medication for their entire life. He's right. They want you. They want your kids to be permanent patients. He says, imagine what happens when Medicare starts paying for Ozempic, which costs $1,500 a month. And that's being recommended for children as young as 6 over a condition, obesity, that is completely preventable and barely even existed 100 years ago. Since 74% of Americans are obese, the cost of, if all of them took Ozempic prescription, is $3 trillion a year. You know they're going to do this too. You know the left is going to be like, hey, taxpayers need to pay for your Ozempic, for your fat pills. And you know the leftists are going to be like, pay for my fat pills. Take more of my, tax me harder, daddy, to pay for my fat pills. He says this is a drug that has made Novo Nordisk the biggest company in Europe. It's a Danish company and the Danish government does not recommend it. It recommends a change in diet to treat obesity and exercise. In our country, the recommendation now is for Ozempic to children as young as 6. Novo Nordisk is the biggest company in Europe, and virtually its entire value is based upon its projections of what Ozempic is going to sell here in America. And we have the food lobbyists. We have a bill in front of Congress today that's backed by the White House, backed by Vice President Harris and President Biden to allow this to happen. This $3 trillion cause is going to bankrupt our country. For a fraction of that amount, we could buy organic food for every American family, 3 meals a day, and eliminate diabetes altogether. He says we're going to bring healthy food back to school lunches. We're going to stop subsidizing the worst foods with our agricultural subsidies. We're going to get toxic chemicals out of our food. We're going to reform the entire food system. And for that, we need new leadership in Washington because unfortunately, both the Democrats and the Republican parties are in cahoots with the big food producers, big pharma, and big ag, which are among the DNC's major donors. President Harris Vice President Harris, has expressed no interest in addressing this issue. 4 more years of Democratic rule will complete the consolidation of corporate and neocon power, and our children will be the ones who suffer most. He says, I got involved with chronic disease 20 years ago, not because I chose or wanted to. It was essentially thrust upon me. It was an issue that should have been central to the environmental movement. I was an essential leader at the time, but it was widely ignored by all the institutions, including the NGOs, who should have been protecting our kids against toxins. It was an orphaned issue, and I have a weakness for orphans. I watched generations of children get sicker and sicker. I had 11 siblings, and I have 7 kids myself. I was conscious of what was happening in their classrooms and to their friends. And I watched sick kids, these damaged kids in that generation. Almost all of them were damaged, and nobody in power seemed to care or even notice. For 19 years, I prayed every morning that God would put me in a position to end this calamity. The chronic disease crisis is one of the primary reasons for my running for president, along with ending the censorship and the Ukraine war. It's the reason I've made the heart-wrenching decision to suspend my campaign and to support President Trump. This decision is agonizing for me because of the difficulties it causes my wife and my children and my friends. And you know what he's talking about there, left? He's talking about you guys. He's talking about you guys and your cult leaders mobbing his family. He's talking about the mobbing and the unpersoning that he knew was going to happen. He knew this was going to happen. He's talking about the articles they're writing right now about how his wife needs to disown him. He said it was agonizing for my wife and children, but I have the certainty that this is what I've meant to do. And that certainty gives me internal peace, even in storms. If I'm given the chance to fix the chronic disease crisis and reform our food production, I promise that within 2 years, we will watch the chronic disease burden lift dramatically. We will make Americans healthy again. Within 4 years, America will be a healthy country. We will be stronger, more resilient, more optimistic, and happier. I won't fail you in doing this. Ultimately, the future, however it happens, is in God's hands, in the hands of American voters, and in those of President Trump. If President Trump is elected and honors his word, the vast burden of chronic disease that now demoralizes and bankrupts the country will disappear. This is a spiritual journey for me. I reached my decision through deep prayer, through hard-nosed logic, and I asked myself, what choices must I make to maximize my chances to save America's children and restore national health? I felt that if I refused this opportunity, I would not be able to look myself in the mirror, knowing that I could have saved the lives of countless children and reversed this country's chronic disease epidemic. I am 70 years old. I may have a decade to be effective. I cannot imagine that a President Harris would allow me or anyone to solve these dire problems. After 8 years of a President Harris, any opportunity for me to fix the problem will be out of my reach forever. President Trump has told me that he wants this to be his legacy. I'm choosing to believe that this time he will follow through. His son, his biggest donors, his closest friends all support this objective. My joining the Trump campaign will be a difficult sacrifice for my wife and children, but worthwhile if there's even a small chance of saving these kids. Ultimately, the only thing that will save our country and our children is if we choose to love our kids more than we hate each other. That's why I launched my campaign to unify America. My dad and uncle made such an enduring mark on the character of our nation, not so much because of any particular policies they promoted, but because they were able to inspire profound love for our country and to fortify our sense of ourselves as a national community held together by ideals. They were able to put their love into the intentions and hearts of ordinary Americans and to unify a national populist movement of Americans, Black, whites, Hispanics, urban and rural Americans. They inspired affection, love, and high hopes, and a culture of kindness that continued to radiate among Americans from their memory. That's the spirit on which I ran my campaign, and that I intend to bring into the campaign of President Trump. Instead of vitriol and polarization, I will appeal to the values and goals that we could achieve if only we were not at each other's throats. The most unifying theme for all Americans is that we all love our children. I want to, Keri, I want to interrupt him here and say not all, but I know what you mean. Okay, let's go. He says the most unifying thing for all Americans is that we all love our children. If we all unite around that issue now, we can finally give them the protection, the health, and the future that they deserve. Thank you all very much. That's the full speech. We did get through the full speech. I wanted to put that caveat because there are some leftists who I do not believe love their children. I know this is true, and also some people on the right. It's not a left-right thing. But if you look in general at the left, there's a lot of policies right now which do not demonstrate love for children. And first among those is sterilizing and mutilating kids. That is not loving children to do that. It's not. That's not a loving parental thing to do. And those people who are supporting that, some of them I think are so far gone. It's like trying to rehabilitate a child molester. It's almost impossible. If they're to the point where they think sterilizing their child and cutting off their kids' genitals is a loving thing to do, they're almost beyond reach for me. Anyway, we got through the full speech. I appreciate you guys hanging in. Yes, D. Martin, this speech is an instant classic. It is. Kids should be reading this. The schools should be putting this in front of them to read. Randy Wallen for $2. Thank you. Says Casey means MD. Good energy is a must read. Thank you for the recommendation, Randy. Good energy. Michael Collier. Hello, Michael, for $9.99. Good to see you. Says thanks for the early show. Oh yeah, you're welcome. Thank you guys for being here. Had to do it early because we're on the road and got to check out of this motel soon. And then Eric Heffelfinger for $10. Thanks for supporting Deprogrammed. Says the bread we eat is illegal in many European countries. It's not even considered food. How do you mess up bread that much? It's true. You guys, if you haven't read about the bread stuff and the seed oils, you have to. I'm telling you, it's bad what they do. And Eric is not wrong. Like my husband we did an episode about this where we kind of talked about it a little bit. Maybe we'll do another one. But they take all the good stuff out of the bread and then they put in a lot of bad stuff. Is that the dummy way of explaining it?
They take out all the natural vitamins and then they re-inject it with fake vitamins.
They take out all the natural vitamins and nutrients and then they re-inject it with these synthetic fake vitamins that are poisoning us. Thank you to my husband.
Did you see my comment?
No, I didn't see your comment. Hold on. Randy Wallen for $10. Thank you, Randy. Says 2 schools in the Kennedy family. Number 1, JFK and the RFKs. Number 2, the Teddy Wing that was and is corrupt beyond imagination. It is embodied by RFK Jr.'s family acting like cultists. You are right. I don't know if we have time to get to it today because, like I said, we have to get to this motel, but they are like vultures on Twitter coming after him. Here, let me just show you a couple things. Well, first, let me show you Mia Farrow. All the Hollywood elite, all the monsters started dropping in like ghouls just coming after him. Mia Farrow said, I knew Robert Kennedy Sr. well enough to know that he would be devastated to know that his son would endorse a person who's the antithesis of every value he stood for. First of all, you walking ghoul, you zombie, how dare you put words in the mouth of his dead father? How dare you presume to speak for his dead father? F you is not harsh enough for what you are doing. It is disgusting. But I love Twitter because you get a lot of good clapback before they close replies like she did eventually. And this girl, Megan Maureen, I don't know who that is. Megan said to Mia Farrow, she said, your judgment of men is so good that your husband married your daughter. Sorry. It's true. Mia Farrow, your judgment of men is so good that your husband married your adopted daughter. That did happen. That did happen, Mia Farrow. You have great judgment. This is one of the Kennedys, Jack Schlossberg. I don't know who this dork is. I looked at his face. He's younger. He's in there somewhere. You guys can tell me which. He's like a nephew or something. He said, never been less surprised in my life. Been saying it for over a year. RFK Jr. is for sale, works for Trump. Bedfellows and loving it. Kamala Harris is for the people. The easiest decision of all time just got easier. This is this guy attacking, is it his uncle? I'm not sure. Anyway, RFK responded to this with F you, which was great. And this guy, by the way, you can go and look at his profile. It's video after video of him talking about being for sale. He is a paid shill for the Democrats. He's paid. He is paid. He's not sacrificing himself. He's not sacrificing. He's not running for. He is paid, and he's doing video after video about how great Biden is. And then when they did the coup and they installed Kamala without an election, he just switched the name and just started doing all the same kind of videos about Kamala. Paid shill. These people are gross. Look at this. Look at this headline. This is from the Post Millennial. Hollywood actor Bradley Whitford. Who the F is he? That guy there on the left? He looks familiar. Bradley Whitford demands that Cheryl Hines is RFK Jr.'s wife. She's the actress from Curb Your Enthusiasm. Hollywood actor Bradley Whitford demands that Cheryl Hines publicly denounce her husband, RFK Jr., for backing Trump. And this is a quote from this douche actor on the left. Quote, way to stay silent while your lunatic husband throws his support behind the adjudicated rapist. What? Who brags about stripping women of their fundamental rights. What? Gutsy, he says. Great example for the kids. Profile and courage. Like they're all bullying her and trying to get her to denounce her husband. This is what cults do. And remember when I said earlier the left has no idea what the right is about? They're in a fantasy land. They're detached from reality. Look at what he's saying. Adjudicated rapist? What? You're not based in reality, dude. Brags about stripping women of their fundamental rights? What? We can't even have a conversation with you because you're not speaking anything that's in reality because you're that crazy. You're talk about lunatic. You're the lunatic. This guy, Bradley Whitford, was in the West Wing. Okay. And look at him. Here he is publicly bullying her, trying to come between her and her husband. There's a special place in hell for you, sir. I truly believe that. You were trying to break up a one flesh union. You were trying to come between a husband and wife. And I hope she grows a pair. I hope she becomes really strong and refuses to bow to any of this. Okay, guys, I got to wrap it up. We got to get going.
You didn't see my comment.
I didn't see your comment. I know, but my battery's about to die. What'd your comment say?
Tiger's been a fugitive all weekend.
My husband's standing here. He says, read my comment. Okay. He says, my lovely husband says, Tiger's been a fugitive this weekend. His theme song, Refugee by Tom Petty. That's true. Tiger was not allowed in the room.
We're not saying he came in.
Anyway, little Tiger's waiting for us in the van. Okay. I had fun hanging out with you guys. Thanks for showing up early. Thanks for supporting Deprogrammed. If you like the show, consider contributing. You can contribute with a super chat or with $1 a month. You can join here at YouTube or at Subscribestar. Subscribestar is probably the best place, but here's also great. Or Locals, Patreon. There's lots of places to support. Hit like on the video, share it with a leftist, share it with the leftist you love. And I'll talk to you guys later. Again, if you're in Colorado, Montana, Wyoming, or New Mexico, go to anthonygarciamusic.com and you can see my husband's band's full schedule for this tour. And you can come out and see us at a show and it would be fun. I would love it. So thank you guys so much and take care. Bye-bye.